When we think of Vikings, we often conjure images of fierce warriors. We see long ships cutting through icy waves and horned helmets in the heat of battle. This picture speaks of incredible toughness and a spirit that could not be broken, but this is only a small part of their story. The true secret to their survival, especially in the unforgiving landscapes of the Arctic, was not just about strength. It was about remarkable intelligence and a deep understanding of the natural world. They were not simply enduring the cold, they were outsmarting it. Their greatest weapon against the relentless winter was not the axe or the sword, it was their home. The sagas and myths paint a heroic picture, but survival is rarely about a single heroic act. It is a daily, grueling challenge. For the Vikings who settled in places like Iceland, Greenland, and even Newfoundland, the enemy was the endless, biting cold. No amount of bravery alone can keep you from freezing when temperatures plummet far below zero for months on end. Their continued existence depended entirely on their ability to create shelter. These shelters were not just simple huts. They were sophisticated, highly engineered survival machines, born from centuries of trial, error, and accumulated wisdom. They were the key to everything. Forget the grand halls of legend for a moment. Instead, picture a low-slung structure, almost growing out of the earth itself. The real story of Viking resilience is etched into the design of these homes. These buildings were a testament to practical problem-solving. Every single element, from the foundation to the roof, was designed with one primary purpose in mind: to conserve heat and protect its inhabitants from the brutal elements. The Vikings understood that the greatest resources they had were the earth beneath their feet and the turf growing upon it. They used these simple materials with a level of ingenuity that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. These structures were the hub of Viking life. They were where families gathered, where food was cooked, where tools were mended, and where stories were told through the long, dark winter nights. The longhouse was more than a home. It was a fortress against the cold. It was the anchor that allowed their communities to thrive in a land that seemed determined to push them out. To understand the Vikings, we must look past the battlefield and into the heart of their homes. It is here we find the untold story of their incredible skill, their deep connection to the land, and their mastery of survival. The first principle of Viking construction was brilliantly simple: work with the land, not against it. Instead of building a house that stood exposed to the full force of the Arctic winds, they built their homes into the landscape itself. They would often choose a natural hollow or the gentle slope of a hillside as their building site. Then they would dig down, sinking the floor of the longhouse several feet into the ground. This technique, known as an earth shelter, immediately solved several problems. The structure was instantly more stable and shielded from the worst of the wind. It was a simple, yet profound piece of engineering. The ground holds a secret that every survivalist understands: geothermal heat. A few feet below the surface, the earth maintains a much more stable temperature than the air above. In winter, while the air might be a bone-chilling -20 degrees, the ground will be hovering much closer to freezing. By sinking their homes into the earth, the Vikings were essentially borrowing this natural insulation. The surrounding soil acted as a massive thermal battery, protecting the interior from the extreme temperature swings happening outside. It was a clever way to get nature to do most of the work for them. This method also saved an incredible amount of labor and resources. By using the excavated earth and stone to build up the lower parts of the walls, they reduced the need for timber. In places like Iceland and Greenland, large trees were a scarce and precious commodity. Every piece of wood had to be used wisely. Building into the earth meant the walls did not need to be as tall or as thick above ground, conserving this vital material for the roof frame and interior posts. This was not just about warmth, it was about sustainable building in an environment with very limited resources. The psychological comfort this provided cannot be overstated. Being inside one of these earth-sheltered homes feels immensely safe and secure. The howling wind outside is muffled to a whisper. The sense of being enveloped and protected by the land itself is powerful. It is a feeling of being anchored and safe from the storm. The Vikings weren't just building a physical barrier against the cold, they were creating a sanctuary, a place of deep and profound security in one of the world's most challenging environments. This connection between the home and the land was fundamental to their success. Once the foundation was dug, the Vikings began constructing their most ingenious feature: the walls. These were not simple walls of wood or stone, they were incredibly thick, layered structures made primarily of turf. The builders would cut large, dense blocks of turf from the surrounding land, complete with the soil and root system intact. These blocks, often called strenger or torf, were the building blocks of their survival. They were carefully selected for their density and strength. The process was slow and methodical, requiring a deep knowledge of the local soil and vegetation. It was a skill passed down through generations. The construction method was a work of art. The turf blocks were laid in a herringbone pattern, which locked them together and provided immense structural stability. They did not build a single wall, but two parallel walls, leaving a gap of several feet between them. This cavity was then filled with looser soil, gravel, and smaller stones. This created a composite wall that was often more than 6 feet thick. The outer layer of turf provided a windproof and waterproof skin, while the inner core of loose earth acted as a massive insulating layer, trapping air and slowing the escape of precious heat. These turf walls were essentially alive. The grass roots within the blocks continued to grow, meshing together over time to create a single, solid mass. This made the structure even stronger and more weather-resistant as it aged. The thick walls also had incredible thermal mass. During the day, they would slowly absorb any heat generated inside the house from the fire, from cooking, and from the bodies of its inhabitants. Then, as the temperatures dropped at night, the walls would slowly radiate this stored heat back into the living space, helping to maintain a stable, livable temperature. The expertise required to build these walls was immense. The builders had to know which type of turf to cut, the right time of year to harvest it, and how to angle the blocks to ensure water would run off instead of soaking in. If done incorrectly, the wall could slump or become waterlogged, leading to a cold, damp home. This was not just manual labor, it was a highly specialized craft. The Viking turf wall was a masterpiece of insulation, structural engineering, and sustainable design, using the most abundant local material to create an almost impenetrable barrier against the Arctic cold. A house is only as good as its roof, and in the Arctic, this is doubly true. The Viking longhouse roof was another marvel of practical engineering, designed to bear immense weight and provide exceptional insulation. The structure began with a sturdy timber frame, often using the curved trunks of trees to create an A-frame shape. This pitch was crucial. It had to be steep enough to shed rain and melting snow effectively, but not so steep that the insulating layers would slide off. Finding this perfect angle was a matter of experience and precise calculation, a secret held closely by master builders. Upon this wooden frame, the Vikings laid a layer of smaller branches or planks. This formed the base for the insulating layers. The first of these was birch bark. Sheets of birch bark were carefully stripped from trees and laid like shingles, overlapping to create a completely waterproof membrane. This layer was the true secret to a dry home. Birch bark is naturally water-repellent and resistant to rot, making it the perfect material for this purpose. It ensured that no matter how much rain fell or snow melted, the interior of the house would remain dry. This was a critical defense against dampness and the chilling effect it has. On top of the waterproof birch bark membrane came the final and heaviest layer-thick blocks of turf, laid with the grass facing upwards. This turf layer was often 2 or 3 blocks deep, adding a huge amount of weight and, more importantly, insulation. This green roof acted like a thick blanket, trapping the heat rising from within the house. In the summer, the grass would grow, helping to bind the roof together and creating a living part of the landscape. A well-made turf roof could last for decades, becoming stronger and more integrated with the house over time. The roof was not just a passive shield, it was an active part of the home's ventilation system. A single smoke hole was strategically left at the peak of the roof, directly above the central fire pit. This opening was carefully designed to draw smoke up and out of the living space, while minimizing heat loss. Some designs may have even had a wooden cowl or cover that could be adjusted depending on the wind direction. This simple but effective chimney system kept the air inside breathable, without letting the precious warmth escape. The roof was the crowning achievement of the Viking longhouse, a multi-layered shield against the elements. Stepping inside a Viking longhouse was like entering another world. The air was thick with the smell of wood smoke, cooked food, and damp wool, but it was a world of warmth and security. The interior was typically one long, open room, dominated by a long fire pit running down the center. This fire was the heart of the home. It provided light, warmth for cooking, and a central gathering place for the entire family. The fire was kept burning day and night throughout the winter, a constant battle against the darkness and the cold. Its management was a critical daily task for everyone in the household. The layout of the interior was designed for maximum efficiency. Along the two long walls were raised wooden platforms. These platforms served as the main living and sleeping areas. During the day, they were used as benches for sitting, working on crafts, or mending tools. At night, the family would unroll their sleeping skins and furs and sleep together on these platforms. This arrangement kept them off the colder earthen floor and allowed them to benefit from the radiant heat of the central fire. It also created a clear division of space, a central corridor for walking and working, and raised side areas for living. Storage was cleverly integrated into the design. The space beneath the raised sleeping platforms was often used to store tools, supplies, and preserved foods. Personal chests containing valuable possessions would also be kept here. In some larger longhouses, the building was even shared with livestock. Animals would be kept at one end of the house during the harshest parts of winter. This might seem unhygienic to us, but it was a brilliant survival strategy. The body heat generated by the animals would contribute significantly to warming the entire structure, reducing the amount of firewood needed. It was a practical solution to a life-or-death problem. Everything inside the longhouse had a purpose. There was no room for wasted space or purely decorative items. The low roof and thick walls created a cozy, enclosed atmosphere. The few possessions they had were functional and durable. The dim light from the fire and a few simple oil lamps would have cast dancing shadows on the walls, a place where stories and sagas were shared to pass the long, dark hours. This was not just a house. It was a self-contained ecosystem, a survival machine where every element of its design and every action of its inhabitants was focused on one goal, making it through the winter. Over centuries, this incredible knowledge of turf construction began to fade. As trade routes opened up and new building materials like imported timber and stone became more available, the old ways were seen as primitive. People wanted houses that looked more modern, like those in mainland Europe. The laborious process of cutting and laying turf was gradually abandoned in favor of faster, though less insulating methods. The closely guarded secrets of the master builders, once passed from father to son, were no longer seen as valuable. Within a few generations, much of this practical wisdom was lost. Today, however, we are beginning to look back at these ancient techniques with new respect. In an age of rising energy costs and concerns about sustainable living, the Viking longhouse offers some powerful lessons. The principles of earth-sheltered construction, super insulation with natural materials, and passive heating are at the forefront of modern green architecture. Architects and builders in cold climates are rediscovering the benefits of using the Earth's thermal mass and building with locally sourced, low-impact materials. The Viking home was, in its own way, a pinnacle of energy-efficient design. For anyone interested in survival or bushcraft, these lessons are even more direct. They remind us that the most effective solutions are often found by observing and working with nature, not by fighting it. The Viking approach was not about high-tech gadgets. It was about understanding fundamental principles of heat transfer, insulation, and ventilation. It shows that with the right knowledge you can create a comfortable and secure shelter using only the materials that the land provides. This is not about nostalgia. It is about practical, life-saving wisdom that is as relevant today as it was 1,000 years ago. The story of Viking housing is a crucial reminder that their success was built on intelligence and ingenuity, not just brute force. It is a story of advanced engineering, perfectly adapted to its environment. By studying these structures, we gain a deeper appreciation for the skills of our ancestors. For historians, it provides a more complete picture of Viking society. For builders, survivalists, and anyone living in a cold climate, it offers a blueprint for resilience. Remembering this lost wisdom is not just an academic exercise. It is about recovering a practical heritage that can help us build a more sustainable and secure future.